Millionaire adopts boy found in the landfill. 5 years later, he gets a shocking call. Richard Thompson gazed out the window of his penthouse office in the tallest building in New York City. His tech company had just closed another $1 million deal, yet the emptiness in his chest had only grown since Elizabeth, his wife, passed away 2 years ago. It was during an unexpected visit to a landfill on the city's outskirts that his life changed completely. Richard had gone to inspect an adjacent property he intended to buy for business expansion when he spotted a boy around 8 years old, thin in dirty clothes, but with a gaze that radiated surprising determination. The child was sorting recyclables with impressive precision, while the adults around him seemed to ignore him entirely. "What are you doing here all alone, son?" Richard asked, stepping forward cautiously. The boy eyed him warily, clutching a plastic bottle tightly to his chest. "Working, sir. Mrs. Gladys needs money for medicine," he replied, before turning back to sorting materials. "Mrs. Gladys? Who is she? Your mother?" "No, sir. She takes care of me and other kids. Our house is right over there." He pointed to a small, exposed brick structure at the end of a dirt road. There was something about the boy that struck Richard deeply. Maybe the responsibility in those young eyes or the dignified way he faced such a harsh reality. "What's your name?" Richard asked. "Tyler, sir." "And how old are you, Tyler?" 8. "I think. Mrs. Gladys isn't sure." Richard's chest tightened. This child didn't even know his own age. "Could you take me to Mrs. Gladys? I'd like to meet her." Tyler hesitated, but finally nodded. He left the bottles neatly stacked in a corner, covered them with an old tarp, and led the way through the heaps of trash, with Richard following. The contrast between the impeccably dressed businessman in his Italian suit and the boy in tattered clothes was stark. Mrs. Gladys's home was modest, but surprisingly clean, given its proximity to the landfill. An elderly woman with white hair and a weathered face greeted them at the door, visibly suspicious at the sight of a suited man with Tyler. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Richard Thompson. I met Tyler at the landfill and was impressed by him." The woman narrowed her eyes, sizing up the visitor. "What do you want with my boy?" she asked, stepping protectively in front of Tyler. "Just to talk. I saw how hard he works and was curious about his situation." Mrs. Gladys relaxed slightly but kept a watchful eye. "Come in then, but wipe your feet. We don't have much, but what we do have is clean." The inside of the house was simple, peeling walls, worn furniture, but clearly cared for. 3 other children watched the stranger with curiosity. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12. "Would you like some coffee?" Mrs. Gladys offered. "I would, thank you." As she went to the small kitchen, Richard studied the children. They all seemed well looked after, given the circumstances, but their living conditions were clearly precarious. "Are they all your grandchildren?" he asked when she returned with a cup of black coffee. No. None are blood relatives. They're children who were left behind, abandoned. I take them in, care for them as best I can. Tyler was the first. I found him as a baby, wrapped in a blanket right near the landfill." The conversation continued, and Richard learned Mrs. Gladys was struggling financially. The house they lived in had overdue rent, and the landlord was threatening eviction any day. Moreover, she suffered from hypertension, and the medication consumed a large part of the little money the older children managed to save from collecting recyclables. "Do you have any documents for the children? Registration, birth certificates, anything like that?" The elderly woman lowered her eyes. "For Tyler and Samantha, yes. The other 2, Jake and Lily, came with nothing. I've been trying to get documents for them, but it's hard. The juvenile court already tried to take them once, said this is no place for children. And it's not, doctor. But it's better than them being alone on the streets, isn't it?" Richard felt deeply moved by the situation. On impulse, he took out his wallet and handed the woman all the money he had inside. "Please, take it. It's to help with rent and medicine." Mrs. Gladys looked at the $100 bills with teary eyes. "God bless you, doctor. God bless you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed, Richard couldn't get Tyler and the other children out of his mind. His mansion in the Upper East Side, once a symbol of status and success, now felt empty and purposeless. Memories of Elizabeth were still everywhere. In the photo frames, the decorations she had chosen with such care, the garden she tended herself. A week after that first encounter, Richard returned to Mrs. Gladys's house with shopping bags, new clothes for the children, and more money. The joy on the little ones' faces when they received clothes that weren't second-hand touched him deeply. During that visit, Tyler showed Richard a school notebook where he did math problems and wrote short essays. Despite only attending public school irregularly, the boy showed remarkable intelligence and a thirst for knowledge. "Do you like studying, Tyler?" Richard asked, flipping through the notebook. "Yes, sir. I want to be a doctor when I grow up. Not a business doctor like you, but a people doctor, to take care of Mrs. Gladys and the sick kids in the neighborhood." That answer struck the businessman's heart. Here was a boy living in such difficult conditions, dreaming not of wealth or fame, but of helping others. The visits became regular. Richard hired a nurse to care for Mrs. Gladys's health and began helping with household expenses. His personal driver, Carl, found these frequent trips to the outskirts odd, but remained discreet as always. A month later, the unexpected happened. When Richard arrived for one of his visits, he found the house in chaos. Mrs. Gladys had suffered a stroke and had been rushed to the nearest public hospital. The children were being looked after by a neighbor who didn't hide her concern. "I can't take care of them for long, doctor. I have my own grandchildren to look after. If Mrs. Gladys doesn't get better soon, I'll have to call child services." Without a second thought, Richard used his influence to transfer Mrs. Gladys to the best private hospital in New York City. The children, however, posed a more complex problem. After a few calls and consultations with his personal lawyer, Mr. William Parker, Richard made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "I'll take Tyler to my home while Mrs. Gladys recovers. For the other children, I'll find temporary families among my trusted employees and pay a stipend to those who agree." Mr. William tried to dissuade him. "Richard, you can't just take a child like that. There are legal procedures. Child Services needs to authorize it. What if this boy has relatives? You could be accused of kidnapping." "Then fix it, William. That's why you're my lawyer. I want temporary custody, whatever it takes to do everything by the book. But I won't let these children end up in an overcrowded shelter." The lawyer sighed, well familiar with that tone of voice. When Richard Thompson made up his mind, no argument could change it. The next day, a social worker from Child Protective Services, Jennifer Wilson, visited Richard's mansion for a preliminary assessment. She seemed skeptically impressed by the surroundings. "Mr. Thompson, I understand your concern for young Tyler's well-being, but I must be clear, this situation is highly unusual. You have no familial ties to the child, nor any experience as a foster or temporary parent." Richard stood firm. "Mrs. Wilson, I know it seems strange, but I felt an immediate connection with this boy. Maybe because I never had the chance to have children with my wife before she passed. And now with Mrs. Gladys hospitalized, someone needs to take care of him." "And why Tyler specifically? Why not all the children?" "I am taking care of all of them. I've already found temporary homes for the other 3. But with Tyler, it's different. Something tells me he needs me, and maybe I need him too." The social worker asked more questions, taking careful notes as she observed every detail of the house. "Do you live alone? Who would care for the boy while you're working?" "I have trusted staff. My housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, has experience with children. She raised 3 of her own, and I can adjust my schedule, work more from home." After over an hour of questioning, Jennifer seemed slightly less skeptical. "I'll present your case to the board for review. In the meantime, I'll speak with Tyler to understand how he feels about this. And of course, we'll need to verify the legal status of these children. Mrs. Gladys may have good intentions, but without proper guardianship documentation, the situation is complicated." 2 days later, Tyler arrived at Richard's mansion. The boy seemed overwhelmed by the size and opulence of the place. His few belongings fit into a worn-out backpack, which he clutched tightly to his chest. "This is your room, Tyler," Richard said, opening the door to a spacious room specially prepared for him, complete with a comfortable bed, a desk, shelves of children's books, and some new toys. The boy stepped in hesitantly, eyes wide as he looked around. All this is for me. Yes, this is your space here. I hope you'll feel at home. Tyler didn't respond. He moved slowly around the room, touching objects as if they were fragile relics. He stopped in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the breathtaking city view. "Can you see our old place from here?" he asked, his voice tight. Richard's throat tightened. How do you explain to an 8-year-old the brutal inequality separating his Upper East Side mansion from the tiny shack near the landfill? "No, Tyler, it's too far. But we can visit Mrs. Gladys at the hospital tomorrow if you'd like." The boy just nodded, still fixated on the window. The first week was tough. Tyler barely spoke, ate little, and Richard often found him asleep, on the floor beside the bed, curled up in a blanket. Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, tried convincing him to use the bed, but the boy insisted it was too soft, and he couldn't sleep in it. At the office, Richard faced quiet disapproval from his partners. Michael Robertson, the most senior among them, was the only one who openly voiced concerns during a board meeting. "Richard, we know you've had a hard time since Elizabeth passed, but this whole temporary guardianship thing, right when we're negotiating the merger with the American group? And what's the problem, Michael? Do you think I can't manage a company and take care of a child at the same time? Thousands of parents across the United States do it every day, with far fewer resources than I have. It's not that. It's the unpredictability of the situation. What if some relative of this boy shows up? What if the press finds out? Millionaire rescues child from the dump. Can you imagine the headlines? So what? It'd be good publicity for the company, wouldn't it? Or a legal nightmare if something goes wrong." Richard ended the discussion by reminding them that, as the majority shareholder, his personal decisions weren't subject to board approval. That evening, he tried to get closer to Tyler. They sat together to watch a movie, but the boy seemed uncomfortable on the plush living room sofa. "You're not enjoying the movie?" Richard asked, noticing the boy's restlessness. "I am, sir. You can just call me Richard, you know. No need to say sir all the time." Tyler nodded, but remained tense. During an action scene in the movie, he flinched at a loud noise and accidentally knocked over a small crystal vase on the side table. The object fell to the floor and shattered. The boy froze, his eyes wide with terror. "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident. I'll clean it up." "I'll clean it up!" he exclaimed, already crouching to pick up the shards with his bare hands. "Tyler, no, you'll cut yourself." Richard grabbed him by the shoulders, stopping him from touching the sharp fragments. The boy flinched as if expecting a blow. "Are you going to send me away now?" he asked in a shaky voice. Richard's heart ached. What kind of life had this boy lived to think he'd be punished or thrown out for accidentally breaking something? "Of course not, Tyler. It's just a vase. Things break. It happens. What matters is that you didn't get hurt." The boy looked at him suspiciously, as if waiting for a trap. "But it looked expensive." "It's just an object. I have plenty. More. But you, Tyler, you're one of a kind. You're worth more than all the vases in the world." That night marked a small shift in their relationship. Tyler still kept some distance, but he began showing signs that he might be able to trust Richard. At the private school where Richard enrolled him, Tyler faced other challenges. His classmates, children from wealthy families, eyed him with curiosity and sometimes disdain, the dump boy who had suddenly appeared in their class. The teacher, however, quickly noticed the new student's potential. "Mr. Thompson, Tyler has an exceptional learning ability, especially in math," Teacher Deborah remarked during a meeting. With the right support, he could not only catch up to the class but surpass them. Richard smiled proudly. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll arrange tutoring for the subjects he's behind in." The daily hospital visits to see Mrs. Gladys became part of the routine. The elderly woman was recovering slowly, but the doctors said it would still be some time before she could return to her normal activities, and even then she'd need special care. It was during one of these visits that Richard met Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the neurologist overseeing Mrs. Gladys's case. Something about the gentle way she treated her elderly patient caught the businessman's attention. "You've done so much for her and the children," the doctor commented as they walked down the hospital hallway after the visit. "It's rare to see someone in your position care so deeply about vulnerable people." I think I spent too much time worrying only about profits and acquisitions, Doctor. Tyler and Mrs. Gladys showed me there are more valuable things in life. A month passed. Tyler slowly adjusted to his new life. He no longer slept on the floor, began eating better, and his school results were impressive. Richard hired a private math tutor who was amazed by the boy's ease with numbers. The other children under Mrs. Gladys's care were also adapting well to their temporary families, and Richard made sure to organize frequent meetups so they wouldn't lose the sibling bond they'd formed. Just as everything seemed to be going well, the first major challenge arose. An elegant woman, around 35 years old, appeared at the reception of Thompson Tech, Richard's company, claiming to represent an international adoption agency. "Mr. Thompson, my name is Rebecca Anderson from the International New Family Agency." She introduced herself once she finally secured a meeting with the businessman. "I'm here regarding the case of the minor Tyler, who is under your temporary custody." Richard felt a chill down his spine. "And what does your agency have to do with Tyler?" The woman opened a folder and showed him some documents. "We have records indicating this boy was registered in our program 6 years ago when he was just a baby. There's a family in Canada interested in legally adopting him." Richard examined the papers skeptically. Something didn't seem right. "Then why only now, after 6 years, are you showing up? And how did you know he was with me?" The case resurfaced when Child Services entered the temporary custody into the system. "As for the delay, unfortunately, international adoption bureaucracy can take years, Mr. Thompson." Richard remained calm, but inside, he was on high alert. "I'll need you to leave copies of these documents with my lawyer, Ms. Rebecca, and I'm sure you won't mind if we carefully verify the authenticity of all this." A tense smile crossed the woman's lips. "Absolutely. We're used to skepticism. After all, we handle children's futures." As soon as she left, Richard called Mr. William Parker. "William, I need you to investigate everything about this so-called International New Family Agency and Rebecca Anderson. Something doesn't smell right in this story." "Any specific suspicions?" "Yes. Michael Robertson. He never supported my decision about Tyler, and now, coincidentally, an international adoption agency shows up specifically interested in him. I also want you to hire a private investigator, the best you can find." While the investigation unfolded, Richard decided to speed up the process to secure permanent custody of Tyler. If there really was a dispute brewing, he needed to be prepared. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Richard's home, once so quiet and formal, was slowly transforming. Tyler's laughter echoed through the halls. Toys were occasionally left in the living room, and meals, once solitary and rushed, became moments of conversation and sharing. "Richard, can I ask you something?" Tyler said one evening over dinner. "Of course. Why don't you have kids?" The question caught the businessman off guard. It was a subject he avoided. "Well, my wife Elizabeth and I really wanted children, but we couldn't. Then she got sick, and..." His voice faltered. "Did she go to heaven?" Tyler finished, with a child's simplicity. "Yes, she's gone." Tyler was silent for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "Samantha's mum went to heaven too. Mrs. Gladys said sometimes people leave but still watch over us." Richard smiled with tears in his eyes. "Mrs. Gladys is a very wise woman. Do you think your wife would be mad that I'm here in your house?" "No, Tyler. I'm sure she would have loved you. Elizabeth always wanted to fill this house with children." 3 days later, Mr. William Parker showed up at the mansion with the investigators' first findings. "Richard, you were right to be suspicious. That so-called International New Family Agency barely exists. It has a shell office and a shoddy website. And Dr. Rebecca Anderson? Guess who paid the rent for the commercial space she uses as a front? Michael? Worse, Apex Holdings." Richard turned pale. Apex Holdings was a holding company controlled by Charles Blackwood, his biggest competitor, the man who had been trying to take over Thompson Tech for years. "So it's not just Michael. This is a corporate takeover disguised as a custody battle?" "It looks that way, but we still don't have concrete proof linking it to Michael." He might just be a pawn in this game. Richard paced back and forth, furious. Using a child like this, how low can they sink? It's about power, Richard. You better than anyone know how this world works. If you're emotionally shaken by a legal battle over Tyler's custody, you'll be vulnerable in the merger negotiations. William, I want you to gather every possible piece of evidence. We're going to expose this sham. But carefully, if we're too aggressive, they might retaliate in ways that could hurt Tyler. Children in custody disputes often end up in temporary shelters, while the case drags through the courts. The fear of losing Tyler made Richard rethink his strategy. That night, as he helped the boy with his homework, he noticed how much he'd changed in the past few weeks. He was no longer the scared, wary child. His eyes sparkled with curiosity and intelligence. "What are you learning in school now?" Richard asked. "Fractions and problems with decimals." "It's actually pretty easy." Richard took the notebook and saw that Tyler was solving equations usually taught to much older children. "Who taught you how to do this?" "No one. I just understand how numbers work. I've always liked math. I used to help Mrs. Gladys count money and tally up the shopping bills." At that moment, Richard had an idea. If his competitors wanted to use Tyler against him, maybe the best defense was to turn the boy into his greatest asset. The next morning at breakfast, Richard made Tyler an offer. "I was thinking, would you like to visit my company, see where I work?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? I can?" "Of course. In fact, I'm thinking of taking you there regularly. There's a project you might be able to help me with." Richard had just acquired a tech education startup and thought a child like Tyler, with his natural math skills and unique life experience, could bring a fresh perspective to product development. At Thompson Tech, Tyler was met with curiosity by the employees. Many had heard rumors about the landfill boy their boss had adopted, but seeing him in person, well-mannered and attentive, made a positive impression. Richard introduced Tyler to the team at the newly acquired startup, LearnSphere. The project lead, Rachel Stevens, a 28-year-old engineer, was especially welcoming. "So you're the famous Tyler. Richard won't stop talking about how sharp you are with numbers." The boy blushed. "I just like math." "Well, we're creating games and apps to help kids learn math in a fun way. Would you like to test some of our prototypes and tell us what you think?" Tyler glanced at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to," the boy replied. While Tyler spent a few hours with the LearnSphere team, Richard met with his lawyers to discuss the fake adoption agency situation. They decided not to confront Michael or Charles Blackwood directly yet, but to gather more evidence and prepare a legal counter-offensive. When they returned home that afternoon, Tyler was buzzing with excitement. "Richard, those games are really cool, but some problems are way too easy for the age they marked, and others are confusing to understand. I told Rachel, and she wrote everything down. And what else did you talk about with the team?" "I said it would be great if the game could adapt to how each kid learns. Because at Mrs. Gladys's school there were lots of students who were good at different things. Some understood better when the teacher drew, others when she explained with stories." Richard was impressed. Without any formal knowledge of pedagogy, Tyler had basically described the concept of adaptive learning, one of the most advanced fields in educational technology. "You know, Tyler, you just gave the company a very valuable idea. LearnSphere can use this to improve their products." The boy smiled, visibly proud. "Can I keep helping?" "Absolutely. In fact, I was thinking we could start a special project together." In the following weeks, Tyler began accompanying Richard to the company at least once a week. The employees grew used to the boy's presence, and many noticed the positive shift in their boss's mood and approach. He seemed more human and approachable since Tyler had entered his life. The LearnSphere team developed a new app based on Tyler's ideas, with a system that adapted to each child's learning style. Initial tests were surprisingly positive, and investors began showing interest in the project. Meanwhile, the investigator hired by Mr. William Parker kept gathering evidence against the fake adoption agency. They discovered that Rebecca Anderson was actually a lawyer who had previously worked for Charles Blackwood on other controversial cases. Richard decided it was time for a direct approach. He invited Michael to dinner at his home, without revealing Tyler would be present. When Michael arrived and saw the boy sitting at the dining table, he seemed momentarily uncomfortable. "I didn't know we'd have company," he remarked, forcing a smile. "Tyler is part of the family now, Michael," Richard replied calmly. "I thought it was important for you two to get to know each other better, especially since he's contributing to the company too." "Contributing?" Michael looked genuinely surprised. "Yes, he's the brains behind our newest project at LearnSphere, the app we're presenting to American investors next week." During dinner, Tyler impressed Michael with his knowledge and intelligence. The boy spoke enthusiastically about the project, explaining concepts that would normally be too complex for a child his age. After Tyler excused himself to do homework, Richard poured whiskey for Michael and himself. "Remarkable boy," Michael commented. "Maybe I underestimated your decision, Richard. Maybe you did. And maybe you also underestimated my determination to protect him." Michael swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "You know, it's curious how an international adoption agency no one's ever heard of suddenly took an interest in Tyler. Even more curious how that agency has ties to Charles Blackwood." Michael's face paled. "Richard, I don't know what you're talking about." "No? Well, I think you do, and I want to make one thing very clear. If you or Charles Blackwood try to use Tyler to get to me again, the consequences will be devastating." "Not for me, for you." His partner set down his glass, visibly nervous. "I think I should leave." "Good idea. And Michael? Tell Charles the game's over before it even started." After Michael left, Richard went to check on Tyler. He found him asleep on his school books, his face peaceful and confident, so different from the frightened boy he had met at the landfill. Carefully, so as not to wake him, Richard carried Tyler to bed. As he tucked him in, he made a silent promise to do everything in his power to secure a bright future for this boy, who, without meaning to, had filled the emptiness in his heart. The following days brought a shift in the company's dynamics. News that the Landfill Boy project would be presented to American investors spread quickly, and Michael kept his distance, avoiding direct confrontations with Richard. The presentation to the investors was a resounding success. The educational app developed from Tyler's ideas received enthusiastic praise, and a preliminary contract was signed to fund its distribution in public schools across the United States. "This is just the beginning," Richard announced during the celebration with the team. "Our mission now is to democratize access to quality education." Tyler, who watched the celebration beside Richard, beamed with pride. For a boy who just months ago had been scavenging for recyclables in a landfill, seeing his ideas turned into something that could help thousands of children was almost unbelievable. As the months passed, the bond between Richard and Tyler grew stronger. The legal adoption process moved forward, with social worker Jennifer Wilson becoming an important ally after witnessing the positive transformation in both the boy and the businessman. Mrs. Gladys, though still needing special care, was recovering well. Richard had hired a home nursing team and completely renovated her house, making it suitable to welcome the other children back. On a sunny Saturday, nearly 5 months after that first meeting at the landfill, Richard and Tyler visited Mrs. Gladys in her newly renovated home. The other children, who had been with temporary families, were also there for a small reunion. "It doesn't even look like the same house," the elderly woman remarked, her voice thick with emotion as she looked around the spacious, well-ventilated living room that had replaced the cramped old space. "And that's not all, Mrs. Gladys," Richard said. "The children's paperwork is being sorted out, and I've hired a social worker and a private tutor who will come daily to help with their care and education." The woman clasped Richard's hands in hers. "When I first saw you all polished in your expensive suit, I thought, here comes another rich man trying to ease his conscience. But I was wrong. You have a good heart, Richard." Tyler, who had been playing with the other children in the newly sodded backyard, ran into the room. "Mrs. Gladys, Lily said she'll be able to come back and live here soon. Is that true?" The elderly woman looked at Richard, who nodded. "It's true, my dear. Once I'm fully better, all of you can come back if you want." Tyler suddenly grew quiet, looking from Mrs. Gladys to Richard with a worried expression. "What about me? Do I have to come back too?" Richard felt a pang in his heart. Despite all the progress in the adoption process, nothing had been finalized yet, and legally, Tyler was still under temporary guardianship. "Tyler, that's up to you," Richard replied carefully. "Would you like to keep living with me, or would you rather come back here with Mrs. Gladys and your friends?" The boy lowered his eyes, nervously fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. I like living with you, but I miss it here too." Mrs. Gladys, with the wisdom that only years can bring, stepped in. "Sweetheart, you can have both. You can keep living with Richard and visit us whenever you want. You don't have to choose." "Mrs. Gladys is right, Tyler," Richard confirmed. "No matter where you live, you'll always be part of this family too." The smile that lit up the boy's face at that moment was worth more than all the million-dollar contracts Richard had ever signed in his life. On the way home, Tyler was unusually quiet in the back seat of the car. "Everything okay?" Richard asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "I was thinking, when the adoption is final, will I really be your son?" "You already are." "My son, Tyler. The paperwork will just confirm what we already feel. And will I have your last name?" "If you want to, yes. Tyler Thompson." The boy tried out the name, smiling. "Sounds nice, doesn't it?" "It sounds perfect," Richard agreed, his throat tight. That simple conversation marked a turning point. From then on, Tyler began occasionally calling Richard Dad, first hesitantly, then with growing ease. A year had passed since their first meeting at the dump. The adoption process was in its final stages, with the decisive hearing scheduled for the following month. Life had settled into a new rhythm, with Tyler thriving in school and Richard balancing his time better between work and the family he was building. The educational app had been a resounding success, already implemented in over 200 public schools across the United States, with plans for international expansion. Tyler continued contributing ideas, and his name was officially listed as a co-creator of the project. One Tuesday morning, as Richard worked in his home office, his secretary called with an unusual message. "Mr. Thompson, there's a woman here at the company reception insisting on speaking with you personally. She says it's about Tyler, but she's not the social worker or anyone from the legal team." "Did she give her name?" "Yes, sir. Her name is Catherine Reynolds. She says she's Tyler's aunt." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. In all these months, no biological relative of Tyler had come forward. Mrs. Gladys had always maintained that she found the boy as a baby, abandoned near the dump with no identification except a small metal pendant engraved with the initials LR. "Tell her I'll be there in 30 minutes. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. Richard drove to his company with his mind full of worries. What if this woman really was related to Tyler? What if she came to claim him? The adoption process, though advanced, wasn't yet finalized. Legally, a biological relative could have priority, especially if they proved there had been some involuntary separation. When he arrived at Thompson Tech, he found a woman around 35 waiting in the meeting room, dressed simply but neatly. She didn't match the image Richard had unconsciously formed of a possible relative of Tyler. There was nothing about her that recalled the harshness of the dump or the difficult life the boy had endured. "Mrs. Reynolds?" Richard greeted formally, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Thompson." The woman shook his hand firmly. There was something in her eyes, a familiar intensity that immediately reminded him of Tyler. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Thompson. No, I came unannounced, but this matter is delicate. My secretary mentioned it's about Tyler. What exactly do you want to discuss?" Catherine took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "I'm the sister of Lauren Reynolds, Tyler's birth mother. I've been looking for him for years." Richard's heart raced, but he kept his expression neutral. "I see. Do you have any proof of this claim?" The woman opened her purse and pulled out an envelope. From it, she removed a birth certificate and a few old photographs. One of them showed a young woman holding a newborn baby. The resemblance between that woman and Tyler was undeniable. The same expressive eyes, the same face shape. "This is Tyler with his mother, my sister Lauren, shortly after his birth. And this," she pointed to the certificate, "is the original birth certificate. His full name is Tyler Reynolds Miller. He was born on March 12th at Newark Municipal Hospital. Richard examined the documents carefully. Everything seemed authentic, but after the episode with the fake adoption agency, he had learned to be cautious. Mrs. Reynolds, I understand this must be emotional for you, but I need to verify this information carefully. How did Tyler end up abandoned? Where is his mother now? Catherine's eyes welled up. My sister didn't abandon him by choice, Mr. Thompson. Lauren suffered from severe postpartum depression. She was a single mother. Tyler's father left her as soon as he found out she was pregnant. 3 months after Tyler was born, she had a psychotic episode. Our mother was caring for the baby that day, and when Lauren came back to get her son, she said she needed to protect him. She took him and disappeared. The woman paused to steady her emotions. We searched for weeks. The police found Lauren, wandering the streets disoriented, without the baby. She couldn't remember what she'd done with him. She was admitted to a psychiatric facility for years. When she finally improved enough to be discharged, the guilt over losing her son consumed her. She took her own life 2 years ago. Richard felt his throat tighten. The story was too tragic to be made up. I'm so sorry for your loss. But how did you find Tyler after all this time? We never stopped looking. My mother, before she became seriously ill last year, hired a private investigator. He searched records of children found around the time and area of the disappearance. 3 months ago, he identified a case of a baby found by a woman near a dumpster, exactly where Lauren had been found disoriented. We followed that lead to Mrs. Gladys, who told us about you. You spoke with Mrs. Gladys? Richard was surprised. Yes, last week. She was very kind, told us how Tyler grew up under her care and how you took him in when she fell ill. She showed us photos of him. Mr. Thompson, there's no doubt he's my sister's son. Richard stood and walked to the window, trying to gather his thoughts. The story matched the facts he knew, the locket with the initials LR that Tyler kept as his only link to the past, his approximate age, the circumstances of his abandonment. What do you intend to do now, Catherine? The question hung in the air for a moment. Richard feared the answer but needed to know. I didn't come to take Tyler away from you, if that's what you're thinking, she finally said. Quite the opposite. I came to thank you for caring for him and giving him the love and opportunities my sister couldn't. Richard turned, surprised. But you're his family. You have rights. Yes, I'm family, and that's why I want what's best for him. From what Mrs. Gladys told me and what I've read in the news about the work you're doing together, you've become a true father to Tyler. Tearing him away from a stable life to live with me, a stranger, would be cruel. Then what do you want? To know him, to be part of his life if he'll allow it, to tell him about his mother, show him photos, let him know he was loved and wanted, that what happened wasn't his fault or Lauren's. That's all I ask. Richard sat back, down deeply moved by the woman's honesty and selflessness. I think that can be arranged, but I'll need to talk to Tyler first, prepare him, and if you don't mind, I'd like my lawyers to verify the documents and your story. Not out of personal distrust, but because we've had issues before with people pretending to have connections to Tyler. I completely understand. I'm willing to take a DNA test if necessary. I have nothing to hide. They talked for a while longer, with Catherine sharing more about Lauren and the Reynolds family. Before saying goodbye, they exchanged phone numbers and planned to meet again the following week, after Richard had time to verify the information and speak with Tyler. On the way home, Richard felt torn between relief that Catherine didn't intend to fight for custody of Tyler and worry about how the boy would react to these revelations about his past. He decided to consult the psychologist who had been monitoring Tyler's development before bringing it up with him. Dr. Jessica Collins, a child psychology specialist recommended by the social worker, listened carefully to Richard's account of Catherine's appearance. Mr. Thompson, children. Tyler's age often have more emotional resilience than we think when it comes to complex identity issues. The key is honesty, while respecting his pace in processing the information. Should I tell him everything at once? About his birth mother, the mental illness, Richard hesitated, avoiding mentioning the suicide. Not necessarily. You can start by saying a biological aunt has come forward who'd like to meet him. Gauge his reaction and let him guide. How much more you reveal. What matters most is that Tyler knows no matter what he learns about his past, his place in your life is secure. That night after dinner, Richard called Tyler into the library, one of the boy's favorite rooms filled with books he devoured with growing interest. "Tyler, something happened today that I need to share with you," Richard began, sitting beside his son on the comfortable leather sofa. "You have that serious look, Dad," Tyler observed. "Is it something bad?" Richard smiled. It was remarkable how perceptive the boy had become to his moods. "Not bad, but important. A woman named Catherine Reynolds came to see me today. She says she's the sister of your birth mother, your aunt." Tyler's eyes widened. "My aunt? But, Mrs. Gladys always said I was left with no identification. From what I understand, that's true. Your birth mother was struggling with health issues when you were a baby, and you were separated under confusing circumstances. Her family has been looking for you ever since." Tyler fell silent for a moment, absorbing the news. "What does she want? To take me away?" he finally asked, his voice shaky. Richard pulled him into a tight hug. "No, Tyler. She made it very clear that's not why. She's here. She just wants to meet you to share about your biological family if you want to know. The choice is entirely yours." "What if I don't want to meet her?" "Then we'll respect that. No one will force you into anything." The boy nervously fiddled with a loose thread on the cushion. "What if I do?" "Then we'll arrange a meeting, on your terms, however you're comfortable. I can be there if you want." Tyler thought for a while. "Did she bring any pictures of my mum?" "Yes, she did, including one of you as a newborn with her." "Can I see?" Richard took out the envelope Catherine had left with him. "These are just copies." Catherine agreed to leave the originals with our lawyers for now for verification. Tyler handled the photo carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure. He stared at the image of the young woman holding a tiny baby in her arms. The love in her eyes was unmistakable. "She looks happy," he murmured, his voice thick. "Catherine said your mother loved you very much. Her name was Lauren Reynolds." "Lauren Reynolds," repeated Tyler. Then suddenly his eyes lit up. "Hellotter, those are the initials on my locket." He ran to his room and returned with a small box where he kept his most treasured belongings. From it, he pulled out a simple metal locket, slightly worn with time, engraved with the initials LR. "Mrs. Gladys said this was with me when she found me. I always thought they stood for my name, like Louise or Leonard, but I never knew for sure." Richard felt a lump in his throat. "It seems it was a gift from your mother, a way for her to always be with you, even when you were apart." Silent tears began rolling down the boy's face. Richard hugged him again, letting him express all the emotions that revelation had stirred. "It's okay, son. Take all the time you need to process this." After a few minutes, Tyler calmed down and went back to examining the photos and documents. "Do I have a grandmother too?" "Catherine mentioned your mother, yes. It seems she's ill now, but she's the one who never gave up searching for you." "And my father? My biological father?" Richard hesitated, unsure how to approach such a delicate topic. "From what Catherine told me, he wasn't present, but that's something you can ask her directly if you want." Tyler fell silent again, thoughtful. "I think I want to meet her," he finally said. "Not today or tomorrow, but soon. And I want you there with me, Dad." "I'll always be by your side, Tyler. Always." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The possibility of losing Tyler, even though Catherine had insisted she had no such intention, tormented him. He'd already asked Mr. William Parker to carefully verify the story and documents presented, but deep down, he knew everything pointed to the truth. In the days that followed, Tyler wavered between curiosity about his biological family and anxiety over what this new chapter would mean for his life. Richard repeatedly assured him nothing would change between them, that the adoption process would continue no matter the new developments. A week later, with Catherine's story confirmed by investigators, the day of the meeting arrived. Richard suggested a neutral location, a quiet cafe near the park where he and Tyler often walked on weekends. Catherine was already there when they arrived, seated at a corner table with a small gift box in her hands. When she saw Tyler, her eyes filled with tears. "You look just like your mother," were her first words. Tyler, usually so talkative, was shy and nervous, gripping Richard's hand tightly. "Hi," he said simply. Richard realized he'd need to guide the conversation at first. "Catherine, this is Tyler. Tyler, this is Catherine Reynolds, your biological..." "Fat?" They sat, and for a few moments an uncomfortable silence hung over the table. Then Catherine gently pushed the little box toward Tyler. "I brought something for you. It's not expensive or fancy, but it means a lot to our family." Tyler looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. The boy carefully opened the box and found inside a small keychain with the letter L in metal. "It was your mother's," Catherine explained. "She had one just like your locket. They were a pair. I thought you might like to have this to complete the set." Tyler picked up the keychain, turning it between his fingers. "Thank you," he murmured, visibly moved. From there, the conversation began to flow more naturally. Catherine showed more photos of the Reynolds family, shared stories about Lauren's childhood, and patiently answered Tyler's questions. She was careful not to overwhelm him with painful details, focusing instead on the positive aspects and the traits Tyler had inherited from his mother: his knack for numbers, his easy smile, his determination. When Tyler went to the bathroom, accompanied by the discreet security Richard always kept nearby, Catherine turned to the businessman with teary eyes. "Thank you for allowing this, and thank you for taking such good care of him. Lauren would be at peace knowing her son is so loved." "He's an extraordinary boy," Richard replied sincerely. "He's changed my life for the better in every way." "I can see that, and he clearly adores you. Dad isn't just a word to him. It's visible in how he looks at you, how he seeks your approval." When Tyler returned, the conversation continued. A while longer. Before saying goodbye, they arranged another meeting for the following week. This time, Catherine would bring her mother, Tyler's grandmother, who, despite her fragile health, was eager to meet the grandson she had lost so many years ago. On the way home, Richard asked Tyler how he was feeling. "It's strange," the boy answered. "Like discovering a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. But it doesn't change who I am now, or how I feel about you, Dad." Richard smiled, relieved. "I'm glad you liked Catherine. She seems like a good person." "Yeah, she's nice. She feels genuine. Not like those people who only get close because you're rich and famous now." Richard laughed at the sharp observation. At just 9 years old, Tyler had already learned to spot people who approached out of self-interest, an unfortunately necessary lesson in his new social position. The meetings with Catherine became regular. Tyler's grandmother, Mrs. Margaret, a 65-year-old woman weakened by cancer in remission but strong in spirit, also became part of their lives. Despite the complexity of the situation, a surprisingly harmonious family dynamic began to take shape. Catherine lived in Westchester, about an hour from New York City, where she worked as a math teacher at a public school, a coincidence that delighted Tyler when he found out. On weekends, she would sometimes visit her nephew, bringing Mrs. Margaret along when the older woman's health allowed. Richard, against all his initial expectations, came to see Catherine and Mrs. Margaret as allies, not threats. They enriched Tyler's life with family stories and connections he could never provide. The adoption process continued moving forward, now with Catherine's explicit support. She signed documents acknowledging Richard as the best choice to assume legal guardianship of Tyler, which significantly simplified the legal proceedings. 5 years had passed since that first meeting at the landfill. Tyler, now 13, had grown into a bright, confident teenager. His contributions to Thompson Tech's educational projects continued, with fresh ideas and perspectives that only adolescence could bring. At school, he excelled not just in STEM subjects, but also in the humanities, proving to be a natural communicator. Richard, too, had changed profoundly over those years. Once an executive solely focused on financial results, he had become a more humane leader, aware of his social role. Thompson Tech now allocated a significant portion of its profits to social projects, primarily focused on education and supporting vulnerable children. Mrs. Gladys, fully recovered, still cared for children in her renovated home, now with official support and proper resources, thanks to a foundation Richard had established in her name. The other children who had lived with her when Tyler was adopted had found stability, Some returned to relatives who were finally able to care for them, others were adopted by loving families, and Samantha, the oldest, was now attending high school on a full scholarship at a private school, courtesy of Richard. On a Thursday morning, as Richard was working in his home office, a habit he'd adopted to be more present in Tyler's life, he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Thompson, this is Dr. Robert Williams from Mount Sinai Hospital." Richard immediately grew alert. That wasn't a familiar name among his contacts. "Yes, doctor, how can I help you?" "I'm calling regarding Mrs. Margaret Reynolds. She was admitted yesterday with pulmonary complications, and her condition is quite serious." "I see, but why are you calling me?" "The patient and her daughter, Catherine Reynolds, specifically requested it. It seems you and your son are considered family." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Over the years, Mrs. Gladys had become a beloved figure in their lives. Despite her fragile health, the elderly woman had an indomitable spirit and sharp wit that had won everyone over, including the staff at the mansion. "Of course, doctor, we'll be there as soon as possible. Please tell Catherine we're on our way." Tyler was at school, so Richard sent Carl, the driver, to pick him up while he headed straight to the hospital. There, he found Catherine in the ICU hallway, visibly distraught. "She took a sudden turn. For the worse," Catherine explained, accepting Richard's comforting embrace. "The doctors say it's more serious this time." Richard offered all the support he could, ensuring Mrs. Gladys would receive the best available treatment, regardless of cost. When Tyler arrived, he went straight to see his grandmother, who, despite the machines and oxygen mask, smiled when she saw him. In the days that followed, the makeshift family took turns at the hospital. Tyler insisted on spending as much time as possible with his grandmother, reading to her, telling her about his projects and studies, even when Mrs. Gladys was sedated and likely couldn't hear. Catherine, exhausted from stress and sleepless nights, eventually accepted Richard's offer to stay temporarily at the mansion, in the guest room near Tyler's. A week later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Mrs. Gladys passed peacefully, with Catherine and Tyler by her side. Richard, who had stepped out only to get coffee, returned to find the two embracing, crying together. The funeral was a simple but dignified ceremony, reflecting Mrs. Gladys's personality. Aside from their small family, a few of Catherine's, colleagues from the school where she taught, neighbors from Westchester, and surprisingly Mrs. Patterson, who insisted on paying her respects to the woman who had never given up searching for her grandson, attended. In the weeks that followed, Catherine had to handle practical matters, selling her mother's house in Westchester, organizing documents and belongings, and making decisions about her own future. During this time, she continued staying at the Yesur mansion at Richard's invitation, as he noticed how comforting her presence was for Tyler in his grief. One evening, as the three of them had dinner together, a scene that had become common in those weeks, Richard made an unexpected proposal. "Catherine, I've been thinking. The school where you teach in Westchester is over an hour from here, and now that—" He hesitated, respecting her recent loss. "Now that Mrs. Gladys is no longer there, what's keeping you in town?" Catherine seemed surprised by the question. "Well, my job, my apartment, my whole life until recently was in Westchester. Have you considered moving to New York City? I'm sure with your experience and qualifications, we could find you a good position at a school here, maybe even at Tyler's school. They're always looking for good math teachers." Tyler, who had been listening quietly, suddenly perked up. "That would be amazing. Aunt Mary could help me with my studies every day, and we wouldn't have to wait until the weekend to see each other." "Any more?" Catherine smiled, touched by her nephew's enthusiasm, but she seemed hesitant. "It's a tempting idea, but I don't want to impose. You have your routine, your structured life." "It wouldn't be an imposition at all," Richard assured. "Huh? Tyler adores you, and I'll admit your company has been a pleasure for me too. The house is too big for just two people, and you already get along so well with the whole staff. Besides—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I think Mrs. Margaret would have liked knowing we're staying united as a family." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Since her mother's passing, she had been questioning her purpose, feeling uprooted. The prospect of being closer to Tyler, of continuing to build that precious family bond was incredibly appealing. "I'll think it over carefully," she promised. "But it's a big decision. I need to consider all the implications." "Of course, no pressure," Richard replied. "The offer stands no matter how long you need to decide." 2 weeks later, Catherine accepted the proposal. With Richard's help, she found a position as a math teacher at a respected private school. Not Tyler's to avoid any awkwardness for the teenager, but an equally good one just a few blocks away. The guest room became her permanent quarters, with the freedom to decorate it as she pleased. To everyone's surprise, Mrs. Patterson, the initially reserved housekeeper, was the first to welcome Catherine as part of the family, guiding her through the household routines and Tyler's preferences. Life moved on. Catherine's presence brought a new balance to the family dynamic. For Tyler, it was the best of both worlds. He had his adoptive father, who supported him unconditionally in all his ambitions and dreams, and his biological aunt, who connected him to his roots and his mother's memory in a way no one else could. For Richard, co-parenting with Catherine turned out to be surprisingly natural. She complemented his parenting skills, offering different perspectives and helping him navigate the challenges of adolescence with more confidence. Over time, they developed a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and their shared love for Tyler. On a sunny afternoon, exactly 5 years after that first meeting at the landfill, Richard was in his office finalizing some documents when he received an unexpected call. It was an unknown number with an area code from a northeastern state. "Richard Thompson," he answered, intrigued. "Mr. Thompson." The voice on the other end was male, hesitant. "My name is Jeffrey Miller. I believe I'm Tyler's biological father." Richard felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. End of story. Dear listener, if this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your opinion means so much to us. Do you think Richard should let the biological father meet Tyler? Share your thoughts in the comments.